Hey there guys, alright, today we are back with some more Unknown 5, this time 5 of the cruelest rulers in history, and this opening picture here is gonna get me demonetized, for YouTube hates any videos dealing with Nazi Germany. They don't care about education. I'm gonna go on a rant about YouTube here. They demonetized my video for like, I guess not being appropriate to protect children or whatever. You have YouTube Kids. Technically, no one under 13 is supposed to be on regular YouTube. Fuck yourself, YouTube. Anyways. that might get demonetized. You know, did that in the first minute of the video. Whatever. Anyways. I think obviously Hitler is going to be in the top 5 here. I'm going to take a guess. I'm going to guess Hitler, Stalin 1 and 2. Those are going to be the top 2. I wouldn't be surprised if Hirohito gets on this list just because of the atrocities that the Japanese military did the Koreans and Chinese. And the Philippines. Pretty much all of Asia. Let's see, who else? Pol Pot, I wouldn't be surprised if he's on this list. However, no, I think Pol Pot might make top 5. I think Genghis Khan's gonna also be top 5. Is that the 5? I guess that's my 5 guesses. But like Vlad the Impaler could be on here just because you know how he impaled people. Ivan the Terrible of Russia, he did some fucked up things. Who else? I know I'm forgetting some others. There are some of my guesses. Before we dive into the video though, make sure you check out the links in my description box or in my pinned comment in the comment section below. Got a link to my gaming channel here on YouTube and a link to my Twitch channel. Would love it if you threw me a follow and hung out in the chat. So now that all that's out of the way, let's go ahead and dive right in.
When examining history for cruel leaders, there are no shortage of candidates. The old adage that absolute power corrupts absolutely seems to ring true, and history...
Oh fuck, I knew I forgot someone. Leopold of Belgium. He's pretty fucked up too.
History has time and again shown that human beings are capable of the most terrible acts in their pursuit of power, wealth, and fame. While it may be true that one man's hero is another man's tyrant, here are 5 leaders who undoubtedly showed extreme cruelty when they held power over their fellow man. Pol Pot was the leader of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia between 1963 and 1997, and became the ruler of Cambodia in 1975 when his forces captured the capital. He held absolute power, and his reign as a totalitarian dictator was responsible for the deaths of an estimated 1 to 3 million people.
I think I've heard, the most common I've heard is 2 million. So I've always just said 2 million with Pol Pot.
Which amounted to about 1/4 of the Cambodian population.
I didn't know it was that high of a percentage though. Quarter? 25%. Dude, what the fuck?
His primary goal as leader of Cambodia was to build his vision of a socialist utopia.
And didn't he also target specifically educated people? I heard, now this was years ago and I think it was on the History Channel, so it's probably wrong. But I think I heard before that like, if you had glasses, he killed you. He targeted you.
And soon after taking power, his government began evacuating cities and moving their inhabitants to the countryside where they would be put to work on collective farms and forced labour projects. He also implemented a concept known as Year Zero, which essentially meant destroying all past culture and traditions and starting again from scratch. Cambodia's past would be erased, and history would begin again, moulded by Pol Pot's hands. The Cambodian people were
that's just a terrifying concept.
arranged into 3 groups called the base people, candidates, and depositees. The base people and the candidates were mainly those who were uneducated peasant farm workers or original members of the Khmer Rouge and might earn full rights in the new Cambodia. The depositees largely consisted of the urban population which had been transported from the cities to the countryside. The depositees had no place in Pol Pot's socialist utopia and were to be eliminated. Their rations were reduced to just 2 bowls of rice soup per day, and starvation soon set in. Anyone tainted by capitalism was classified as the enemy, and teachers, lawyers, and doctors, along with anyone with an education, were subject to arrest, torture, and execution.
Okay, I got the education part right.
Even simply wearing glasses, having soft hands.
Holy shit, I was right about the glasses thing? Cool.
Or being able to speak a foreign language
cool.
would mark you for death. Hundreds of thousands of people would be shackled and led into fields where they would be forced to...
I wear contacts. So, back then I would be killed.
Dig their own mass graves. Often these people would be buried alive, tortured, or simply beaten to death as bullets were seen as too valuable to waste. These mass graves have since become known as the killing fields, and the bones of the victims of this genocide are still on display at memorial sites across Cambodia.
I'm sorry, but if I was killed in a genocide, I wouldn't want my bones on display, man. I wouldn't want my no. I don't...
The regime's philosophy was made clear in a chilling...
This video is definitely getting demonetized. I'm not gonna make any fucking money.
Broadcast made over the state-controlled radio. The broadcast stated that only 1 or 2 million people would be needed to build the new utopia, and the message for the others was, quote, "To keep you is no benefit, to destroy you is no loss." Hundreds of thousands died from starvation, disease, and execution. All religion was banned, and minority ethnic groups suffered severe persecution. Food sources that were difficult to centralize, store, and control were destroyed, and even fishing was outlawed. Hospitals and medicine were abolished, and all property was seized and became collectively owned. Pol Pot's nightmarish reign of terror eventually came to an end after intervention from neighbouring Vietnam. After years of escalating tension between the two countries, war broke out, and the Cambodian army was defeated in 1979. Vietnam installed a new government, and Pol Pot fled to the border region between Thailand and Cambodia, where he continued to wage a guerrilla war with those forces who had stayed loyal to him. He eventually died in 1998, supposedly of a heart failure, although there were rumours that he took his own life when he realised that he was to face trial for his crimes. Number 4. Timur the Great.
Ooh, I don't think I've heard of this.
Also known as Tamerlane, the name Timur means iron, and gives a hint at the character of the man. Timur was the founder of the giant Timurid Empire, which encompassed much of Central Asia and the Middle East. Much of his lifetime was spent at war, and he campaigned everywhere from southern Russia to Turkey and even India, and he seemed obsessed with the idea of restoring the great Mongol Empire forged by Genghis Khan. His military campaigns were particularly bloody, even by the standard of his day, and are thought to have caused the death of up to 17 million people.
17 million people back then? What the fuck, dude?
Which was 5% of the world's population at that time.
Yeah!
Like the Mongols before him, Timur was particularly cruel and ruthless to those who would dare defy him. During his conquest of Persia, the city of Herat refused to surrender to his armies. His response was swift and merciless. The city was completely destroyed, and most of its inhabitants were massacred. However, more creative punishments would be used for the already conquered who would dare to rebel. In 1385, the conquered city of Esfazar revolted while Timur was campaigning in Georgia. The rebellious town was quickly recaptured, and the survivors of the attack are said to have been cemented into the walls of the city. A grisly fate also awaited the rebellious city of Isfahan, which revolted and killed Timur's tax collectors. The city's 200,000 inhabitants were massacred, and great towers were built out of the heads of the slain. 100,000 Hindu captives were also beheaded after the capture of Delhi. 60,000 people were enslaved in Armenia and Georgia, and 90,000 people were killed in Baghdad.
Yo, he's fucked up.
Where severed heads were arranged into giant pyramids. Such massacres occurred all over Timur's empire, and he seemed to have a liking for constructing giant pyramids or towers from the heads of his enemies. However, this cruel behaviour was not without logic. These tactics of terror seem to have been part of Timur's overall strategy and were very effective at discouraging resistance and possibly even preventing further bloodshed. Many towns and cities would simply surrender without a fight for fear of Timur's cruel reputation, and conquered territories were unlikely to revolt once they learned the fate of previous rebels.
I mean, I guess, but still. Not cool, dude.
Timur finally died in 1405 while invading China, and in a final twist to his legacy, his casket was inscribed with the words, "Whomsoever opens my tomb shall unleash an invader more terrible than I." 3 days after his casket was opened by archaeologists, Adolf Hitler began his invasion of the Soviet Union.
No fucking way. No fucking way. No. No. That's fucking freaky circumstance, dude. No fucking way.
And shortly after Timur's remains were reburied, the Germans were defeated at Stalingrad.
That's fucking freaky circumstance, dude. That's really fucking freaky. Yo.
Number 3. Queen Ravalona I of Madagascar.
Never heard of her.
Ravalona I
Alright, so far I've only got one of them.
Madagascar from 1828 to 1861, and has left behind a legacy as cruel and brutal as any male leader in history. Throughout her reign, she was focused on keeping colonial powers out of Madagascar, making her country as self-sufficient and isolated from the outside world as she could. In her efforts to strengthen Madagascar so that the kingdom could withstand European attack, she made heavy use of forced labour as a tax payment, using this labour to complete public works projects, as well as to build a standing army of 30,000 men. Her new army was immediately put to use expanding her kingdom, as well as crushing opposition to her rule. The continuous warfare and high level of brutal forced labour skyrocketed the mortality rate amongst soldiers and civilians, and it's estimated that the population of Madagascar declined from around 5 million to 2.5 million between 1833 and 1839. As part of her efforts to curtail British and French influence within her realm, she banned the practice of Christianity amongst her people and banished most foreigners from her kingdom. Treaties and trade relationships with outside powers were ended, and anyone who disobeyed her commands could expect harsh punishments. Mass executions were common, and slavery was rife, with over 1 million people thought to have been enslaved on the island during her reign. Simply being found with a Bible in your possession could result in being jailed, tortured, or even executed, and one infamous account reveals how 15 Christian leaders were publicly executed by being dropped 150 feet into a rock-filled ravine after refusing to renounce their faith. Perhaps the strangest aspect of her reign was the mass use of the traditional practice of trial by tangina. This involved extracting a poison from a local shrub, which would then be eaten along with 3 pieces of chicken skin by someone who was accused of a crime. If all 3 pieces of the chicken skin were vomited up, then the accused was declared innocent. Death from the poison or failure to vomit the 3 pieces of chicken skin indicated guilt. Somewhere between 20% and 50% of those who took part in this ordeal would die from the poison, and with the practice being applied at the mere accusation of a crime, death from this strange ritual soared. In the 1820s, an average of 1,000 people were poisoned to death every year through this ritual. However, that number rose to an average of around 3,000 per year during Queen Ravalona I's reign, and it's thought to have hit a staggering 100,000 deaths in 1838. Although the Queen succeeded in keeping Europeans out of Madagascar, her people paid a terrible price.
I don't know if that would put her above Timur, the 4th dude. Although she didn't seem, I mean, she wasn't building, you know, statues out of skulls and stuff. Building the statues out of skulls and executing whole entire cities. 17 million people seems way more fucked up than the 3rd place. I'm just saying. That's just my personal thought.
Number 2. King Leopold II of Belgium.
Somewhat got another one. I'm counting him because I did say him at the beginning of the video. So, 2 out of 4 so far.
Leopold II was the 2nd king of the Belgians and reigned for 44 years until his death in 1909, making him the longest reigning Belgian monarch. Although his rule within Belgium was somewhat uneventful, he is infamous for founding the Congo Free State in Africa, which he brutally exploited as his own personal colony. His quest for personal
That's right, it wasn't a Belgian colony. It was King Leopold's colony.
Riches led him to establish the Congo Free State under the guise of wanting to bring Christianity, Western civilization, and commerce to the natives. He hired the explorer Henry Morton Stanley to establish his new colony, and the explorer spent 5 years setting up trading posts and persuading local tribal chiefs to sign treaties with the Belgian king. Many of these treaties were subsequently doctored by Leopold, and many of the chiefs who signed the treaties were illiterate and unaware what they were agreeing to. On the 5th of February 1885, the Congo Free State was established, which encompassed an enormous area 76 times larger than Belgium. It soon became apparent that the king had little interest in enriching the lives of the native people, and was more focused on obtaining great wealth for himself. Using his own private mercenary force, he began extracting huge amounts of wealth from his new colony. He started by collecting and exporting ivory. However, in the 1890s, rubber became a resource that was in high demand, and the price of rubber rose rapidly. His focus quickly shifted to collecting sap from rubber plants. However, this process was extremely labour-intensive. To solve this problem, native peoples began being used as forced labour to harvest and process the precious rubber. His 19,000-man strong private army would take a village's women hostage, forcing the men to gather and bring back a quota of rubber. The quotas were high, and the men had to hunt far and wide to obtain enough rubber to meet their quota and thus free their women. Failing to meet a quota was punishable with beatings, mutilation, and even death.
Losing an arm.
Such forced labour became widespread, and thousands of men were worked to death. Thousands more fled their villages to escape being used as forced labourers, only to starve in the surrounding forests due to a lack of food. Many more died in failed uprisings against their new overlord, and the king's mercenary soldiers were required to produce a severed hand for every bullet they used, so as to prove that their bullets had been used to kill rebels instead of being used for hunting food. If a soldier fired a shot and missed, he would still need to present a hand to his officer, which often resulted in living victims having their hands chopped off. This huge level of forced labour had a devastating side effect. With most able-bodied adults put to work generating wealth for the king, few people were left to hunt for food and tend to crops. This left millions of people near starvation, and disease spread like wildfire amongst the weakened population. With so many men separated from their wives, the birth rate plummeted, which, combined with the killing, starvation and disease, is thought to have resulted in the population of the Congo Free State dropping by up to 50%, from around 20 million to 10 million between 1880 and 1920. King Leopold managed to contain criticism of his private colony for several years. However, the results of such widespread suffering and death eventually led to an international outcry, and the king was forced to hand over control of his colony to the Belgian government in 1908. Number 1.
Hitler.
Idi Amin.
Hitler wasn't even in the okay. No, I can understand. Honestly, a bit surprised I did it. I think I would have put Hitler instead of that third place woman. I'll be honest. Yeah, she poisoned people, but Hitler also gassed people alive. I could understand also not picking Hitler because it's an obvious choice, but I'm still surprised.
Idi Amin Dada was the third president of Uganda and ruled from 1971 through to 1979. He first showed his brutal side while serving in the British colonial army, and became known for using torture during interrogations, as well as killing people whom he had been ordered to arrest. Despite showing such callous brutality, or perhaps even because of this dark side, he rose quickly through the ranks, and upon Uganda receiving independence from the British, became a captain and then a major. By 1970, he was commander of all of the armed forces. However, his relationship with the Ugandan Prime Minister soon fell apart, and upon discovering that the Prime Minister was planning his arrest on corruption charges, Amin seized power in a military coup in 1971. Soon after seizing power, Idi Amin unleashed a campaign of terror against his own people that resulted in the deaths of an estimated 500,000 Ugandans. He cracked down on all opposition, both real and imagined, tortured and killed people without trial, and persecuted opposing ethnic groups. In the purges that would follow, religious leaders, journalists, rival tribes, foreign nationals and students all fell victim to his death squads. The bodies of his victims would be thrown into the River Nile and were continuously being fished out at a nearby dam to prevent the intake ducts from becoming clogged. He created his own intelligence agency called the SRB, the headquarters of which would become home to some of the worst human rights abuses, including torture and execution. It was here that political prisoners would be taken, and there are accounts that many people held here were forced to beat each other to death with sledgehammers, with the false belief that victory in these twisted fights might earn them a quick death. Over time, his behaviour became increasingly eccentric, and wild rumours began circulating. There were reports that he began keeping the heads of his enemies in a freezer, taking them out occasionally to have lengthy conversations with them, and there were even reports that he began indulging in cannibalism. In August 1972, Amin launched his so-called economic war, which was a set of policies aimed at Asians and Europeans living in Uganda. Over 80,000 people of Asian and European ethnicity, most of whom were born in Uganda, had their properties and businesses seized, and were expelled from the country. Their businesses were then handed over to Amin's supporters. However, this proved to be a disaster for the Ugandan economy. The businesses were poorly managed, and many subsequently collapsed, causing enormous hardship for the already suffering Ugandan people. Idi Amin's downfall began in 1978, when he invaded neighbouring Tanzania, By 1979 he was losing the war, and when the Tanzanian army backed by Ugandan exiles invaded Uganda,
Tanzania.
Amin was forced to flee into exile, where he eventually settled in Saudi Arabia before dying in 2003.
Of course fucking Saudis let him in.
So there are my choices for 5 of history's cruelest rulers.
That was a good fucking list. Learned quite a bit. I still disagree on that 3rd place woman. I don't agree with the queen, that Madagascar queen. Just compared to the others on this list, she didn't seem like she fit. I think she was more picked because she was just not well known. And I mean, yeah, she's fucked up, perhaps top 10. But I don't know if she's top 5. Certainly not top 3. Yeah, that's my thought. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.